welcome back to Cross Claim. I'm Luke,
And I'm Mike.
and we're excited to give out episode 3 of the People of the Bible series. You know, I've enjoyed it so far. We're 2 episodes in, and I'm a little excited about how different we've done it. You know, it's a little different because see, I'm not even prepared for this episode because you're doing the person.
Right, and
So
I'm
the
prepared,
feel's
and
so different.
and you have to just kind of feed off of what I'm saying, which is good. There's perks to it all. You know?
Yeah. So I want to start by saying, I want to start by saying this. Were you surprised at who I picked? What was your thoughts on who I picked the first time? First
I don't
episode?
didn't know much about her, so I thought it was a good story. I thought it was a story of grace, and mercy. We talked about that. Actually, we're on Sunday. We usually record on a Sunday, and we talked about that this morning in school.
Uh-huh.
In church, but and I think that's good. But I did enjoy the story of Abigail. It was good, and I'm just gonna take this moment to kind of recap what we talked about. We talked about how Abigail was graceful to her husband, although he didn't deserve it, and then we talked about Peter and his doubtful, but the story of Peter and how he was doubtful, but he always stayed faithful to God, to Jesus, in Jesus' ministry. So that was good, and that kind of recaps it. And I think I want to just go ahead and continue with episode 3 and go ahead and open the floor for your guess on who I have, knowing that it is a woman today,
It's a woman.
and it's a woman of the Bible. And I'll let you guess once, and then from there I'll give you one hint.
Okay, all right. So I was thinking about this the other day, and the person I'm going to guess is Mary. You're talking about a Mary of the Bible.
A Mary? No.
Okay, no Mary, because there's like 3. But
All right, and to give you the hint, she demonstrates being noble.
noble, Ruth.
Yep.
Okay, that was pretty spot on.
Pretty big hint. So I'm gonna go ahead and open my Bible today. Open God's Word to the story of Ruth, and a lot of us know the story of Ruth. It's a pretty famous story, pretty good story. But I feel like, although some of me, and let's go ahead and put it this way, although some of me wish, is hopeful to talk about people that are not as popular in these seasons, but then again, it's hard to not talk about the ones that are popular because there's a reason why they're popular. If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And the story of Ruth is interesting. Really, really interesting, and there's a lot of, I want to say, Easter eggs in the story of Ruth. And what I mean by that is you can kind of get a grasp knowledge of the book of Ruth, or you can really search words and what they mean, and the Torah and what Boaz did, and everything that are Easter eggs, like different movies put in there, that really just changed the dynamic of the story. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. I kind of want to get into it, but I'm not going to get it too deep. I'm going to give a little synopsis or a summary, and really see how we as men, but specifically women, can learn from Ruth. And so first off, I just want to go ahead and start it off. You kind of have to know what happens in Judges to really know what happens in Ruth. But let's just go ahead and put it to you that they're coming out of the time of Judges, and they're Ruth and I want to say Naomi, right? If I'm correct, Naomi. Because I don't really know how to pronounce all the words, but Naomi, that's what we're going to call it today. Her today. So Naomi is fleeing from the land of Moab, and from Bethlehem or Judah, the land of Judah, into Moab, going to Moab.
Okay. And
she's going to Moab, and they were only supposed to be there because there was a famine in the land that they were in, and so they fled to the land of Moab, and they were only supposed to be there for a little bit. They ended up being there for 10 years. I want to go ahead and read chapter 1, verses 9 through 14 of Ruth. And if I say chapter 1 of something, just know we're in the book of Ruth. So chapter 1 of 9 through 14, I I want to go ahead. Well, first off, let me give you a little pre of what's going on in chapter 1. So they go into Moab. They're not supposed to stay there very long, but they end up staying there for 10 years. We see that in verse 4. And Ruth married Naomi's son, correct?
Okay.
And he passed away. So did who was Ruth's sister again? Remind me.
Not Martha.
Orpah or something.
I don't know.
Ruth's sister's husband passed away as well. So, nonetheless, Naomi's 2 sons passed away, and all that she was left with was her 2 daughter-in-laws, right? Which are not her true daughters, correct?
Okay.
So then they go into flee to Moab, and now let's go ahead and start reading chapter 1, verses 9 through 14. May the Lord grant each of you rest in the house. This is Naomi speaking to Ruth and her other daughter, to the house of a new husband. She kissed them and wept loudly. They said to her, we insist on returning with you to your people. But Naomi replied, return home, my daughters. Why do you want to go with me? Am I able to have any more sons who could become your husbands? She's saying that because she's in old life. Return home, my daughters. Go on. For I'm too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me to have a husband tonight and to bear sons, would you be willing to wait for them to grow up? And the only thing I can think about when she says that is they're not her true daughters. So they don't really, they have ties to her, but it's like your mother-in-law, you know? So, would you wait for them to grow up? Would you restrain yourselves from remarrying? No, my daughters. My life is much too bitter for you to share because the Lord's hands has turned against me. Again, they wept loudly, and here's her name, Orpah. I want to say Orpah. I don't know how to really pronounce that. Kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her.
Oh, wow.
So what do we see here? We see kind of Ruth's sister say, okay, I agree with you. Let me move on from you. But Ruth said, no, I want to stay with you. I want to stay with you. I want to cling to you. Whoever you are is wherever you are is where I want to be. And then we read in verses 16 and 17, your God will be my God.
Oh, wow.
She's going to be under the leadership of her. She's going to stick with Naomi. She's going to stick with her mother-in-law. And if we think about the importance of that, really think about how Ruth is not Naomi's true daughter.
Right.
They could really split ways and not even have any ties to each other.
Yeah.
But Ruth said, no, I'm going to stick with you. And before this, we see that they start to return back to the land of Judah. They start to, and Naomi says, I'm going to change my name to Mara, which really means bitterness. I'm bitter because the God has turned against me. She's pretty much saying, God, you've done too much. You've done worse. You took my sons away. Why are you doing this? But Ruth stays with her through these trials. She lost her husband, and she clings to Naomi instead of going to find him. And then from there, we see they meet. They go into the land. They come back to the land of Judah. They see that we find this guy named what? Boaz. And why is Boaz important? Okay, I just want to ask you, do you know why Boaz is important? Can you get in the story?
I think of kinsman redeemer. Isn't that right?
Correct, yes.
Kinsman redeemer, and I've always heard of that. I'm not exactly sure what kinsman means there. Relative?
Yes. They're long relative. It's not like your first cousin or your brother or anything, but they're in the long lineage of relative, yes.
Okay.
Of now Naomi, not Ruth.
Okay, Naomi, okay. So see, you're already getting me thinking the reason, looking at, okay, so Ruth decided to stay with Naomi and she eventually found Boaz. If she wouldn't have stayed with Naomi, Ruth may not have ever met Boaz.
Okay.
It's from what I'm thinking into this.
All right, yeah, we're getting into it. So we meet this guy named Boaz, and Boaz is pretty wealthy. He's got land, okay? And Naomi pretty much gives Ruth a mission, and Ruth says, you know what Ruth says? Whatever you say, I'll do. I'm going to do it if you tell me to do it. And what Ruth said was to go out and pretty much try to make a life. But to come, Ruth was always going to come back to it. was to find food. So Ruth's going to find food, try to make life, try to support the family. Ruth goes out and ends up picking up barley from a field that Boaz owns. She gets these bags, and Boaz knows her from being a kin. He doesn't initially see that, oh yeah, that's my kin, but he's heard of her being noble and being faithful to Naomi. And he rewards that. And that is what I mean by the Torah. He is actually obeying the Torah because the Torah says help the immigrant. And she's the immigrant. She is the less fortunate. She's not from the land, and she's coming out from the land and picking up his things. And she actually helps her and gives, I think the number was 26 something of barley, if I could remember correctly. I could probably find it. But just giving you a summary still, nonetheless, he helps her and gives her more than what she could have picked up by herself.
Right.
She brings back the bread, the barley, and to her mother-in-law, Naomi. And she's like, whoa, how did you get all this? And then she explains to Naomi who he was and what he did. And then that is where Naomi goes, click, light bulb, that's my kin. We're actually related. Go back and show him that you're available. Dress in nice clothes, put some perfume on, and show him that you're available. And so she does. And from there, he realizes that who she is, and he sets up. You talk about the Redeemer. When you're redeeming, he sets up these 10 men to buy their land back from her 2 sons that passed away because they owned land as well. I skipped over that, but to buy the land back, none of the 10 men did. And Boaz says, I'll be the Redeemer. I'll buy the land. And with me buying the land comes with Ruth, and we'll get married. So that's what the contract was, and that's kind of why the 10 men didn't want to do it, because Ruth was part of the plan. If you buy the land, you have to marry Ruth to continue her lineage, pretty much. Do you know what the lineage of Ruth is?
I want to say up to Jesus.
Yes, she's in the lineage of Jesus, right. Which then again, you have to come back to the sovereignty of all this.
Yeah.
So we see Ruth staying faithful to Naomi, and I want to read this real quick. So Ruth goes through so many troubles here. She could have easily gone another route, but she stayed true to Naomi. She lost her husband through it all. And God blesses her. Here we go. Let's read chapter 4, verses 13 through 17. Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. He slept with her, and the Lord granted conception to her, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you without a family redeemer today. May his name become well known in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. Indeed, your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons. She lost her 2 sons, and pretty much the Bible's saying here that Ruth has been better than 7 sons to you. Has given birth to him. Naomi took this child and placed him on her lap and became his nanny. The neighbor woman said, a woman has been born to Naomi, and they named him Obed, I think. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David.
That's cool.
So he's in the lineage of Jesus. So we see it all being sovereign, because we know that Jesus comes from that lineage. And so what can we learn from this? I want to go ahead and open the floor to you, Luke. What in your mind, here in this story, what comes to your brain?
I try to think of the context of that culture at that time and how important it was, how important marriage meant to them, how important it meant for them to carry on the lineage of people. Mm-hmm. And how much family meant to them at that time. So I think about how important it was for Ruth to stay with Naomi, because obviously they placed importance in Ruth being married to Naomi's son and Opha, right, being married to one of Naomi's sons.
Yeah.
There was a lot of importance there, a lot of emphasis there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when Naomi's sons died, Naomi sort of was at the point where she was like, well, there's no point in you continuing to be with me. There's no point in you continuing to cling to me and have a relationship. You need to go on and leave so you can find someone else to be with. Essentially, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I just see how awesome it is to see how God worked through that for Ruth to stay with Naomi and for God to supply Ruth with a husband, even though it wasn't from the direct lineage of Naomi. But it came through her relationship with Naomi. You know what I'm saying? And so I just thought that was interesting because she really took a chance there. She's like, man, I'm sticking with Naomi. I love Naomi. She's my mother-in-law. Even though my husband has died, I'm still going to stay there with Naomi. And so for Ruth to make that honorable decision, God ended up working through that to bring her to Boaz, which is just cool to see,
And I agree with you, man. And honestly, where I wanted to go with this story is friendship and even relationship, or just relationship. And when I say relationship, that's kind of broad. And what I mean by that is me and you have a relationship, right?
Right.
Me and my friend has a relationship, but we have all different types of relationships. Like, we can have a relationship with a girl in a marriage type of way, or we can have friendship. And I think that's really where I'm trying to go with this, is how Ruth stayed faithful to Naomi even in the trials that they went through, and God blessed that situation, right? So what I mean by that is, a lot of times in our generation and how we grow up and how we live, when times get hard with somebody, we're ditching out. I mean, heck, I don't even know the stats of it, but what's the rate? I mean, just think about this, Luke. What's the popularity of divorce right now?
Oh, yeah, don't even get me started on that, because that's actually bothered me recently to the point where it's like, do I even want to try to get married? Because it's like you look at that rate and it's like, wow. It's way up there. I can't give any numbers right now, but I know so many friends, and my heart goes out to you because I think about that aspect and how it could affect me one day if I marry and all of a sudden my wife's like, I'm leaving.
Exactly. Thought about the same thing. Because although, we are...
I would be committed, and I would dare say right now I would never want to consider divorce. So I'm like, but what if she wants to leave?
Exactly. But you can't control somebody else.
No.
If they want it bad enough, it would happen. And that's where I'm really going with it, is the rate of divorce now, and the rate of people just easily ready to destroy a friendship over maybe something small, but even if it's big, and not trying to see it out and work through those things, it breaks my heart. And I think that's why, looking at a story like this, of Ruth saying, yeah, I could have easily just, ditched you, gone my own way, figured my own way out, found a husband. Heck, let's just even be kind of gruesome here. Slept around after my husband left. I could have done things the wrong way, but I stayed true to you. And here's another thing we need to think. Was Naomi kind of neglecting God in that moment?
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah,
and Ruth stayed truthful and said, your God will be my God. I'm going to be with you, here with you. I'm going to be your friend. I'm going to be with you through this all. And without Ruth, I'm not saying Naomi wouldn't have made it, but Ruth helped out with that.
No doubt.
Luke, if you ever go through something traumatic, I'm here for you. You see what I'm saying? You need to be there for your friends through those things, because that's when you don't want to see somebody. Is it really worth it? Let's just put this in perspective. Is it really worth it to leave a friend and the possibility of their eternal place being hell for it? And what I'm saying is, I'm not saying you write their destination, but I'm saying you could help them not lose their faith in God.
Yeah.
Because you could be that person to help them, that God could use for them. I'm not saying we have that much power to save somebody, or we have that much power to give somebody heaven, because that's up to God.
No,
but
you're right.
But we can kind of be like the bowling ball when we have to have what are they called?
Pins?
No, what are they called? Those things that you use as a kid when you're bowling.
Guards.
Guards.
Bumper
guards. God can use us for people like that that's going through some troubling times. You can bounce on that and rely on them to keep you going down that road.
Yeah, because even if it's just the potential that's there, you know a friend that is going through a hard time, or that may have left the faith or something like that. Something that I tend to think about sometimes is, well, at least they know I'm still here for them. I might not talk to them every day. I might not be crazy close to them every single day, but they know I love them. They know we're close. And, if that potential's still there for them to reach out to me if they ever need somebody to talk to.
Exactly. And I think that's what friendship is. And I think although, technically Naomi was still Ruth's mother-in-law, Ruth was more of a different age gap, but a lot of age gap, but she was more of a best friend to Naomi and helping her out.
Yeah.
And honestly, giving her, the Bible says giving her more than 7 sons would do. Being such a support for her, it was so good to her. So that's what I really wanted to go to is, if it hits hard with me because, I know if any of my friends from my childhood are listening, and, I know that I've done people wrong in my past. And I've gone and asked for forgiveness for that. But there's so many times in my life where I've ditched out on friendships and I've wondered that I should have stayed. So this is not just talking to y'all. This is talking to me too. But we need to stay faithful and true in these friendships that we have and these relationships that we have and helping people out with stuff and not just leaving out when it gets hard or convenient for us. Because that's all we're about is convenience. If our food doesn't come out when we're in the restaurant within 10 minutes, we're mad because it's not convenient. If things aren't convenient for us, if things get hard, we ditch out. And I'm guilty of that as well. But we need to stay true because Ruth could have easily ditched out, but she stayed true and God saw it at the end. And that's really where I want to go to. I'll just open the floor back to you to see if you have anything else to say.
The one thing I would add to that is, based off of what you're saying with the convenience thing and about just bouncing and leaving, something that we should lean on as Christians, especially, and those who are unbelievers. I pray that this can minister to you, but, God, think about how patient God was with you. Think about how he's patient with us even today.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That can help give us motivation and get to the heart of the matter of, man, should I really be getting upset that my food's coming out late? Even those small things, because those small things can lead to bigger things. It's a small thing to get upset because your food is coming out late, but that's something small to get upset about. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That's a small thing, but it's still a small, okay, come on, get over that. You're going to get food, you know what I'm saying? But that could lead to bigger things where you're upset at a friend because of something. You know what I'm saying? That little thing could grow into something bigger where you're just getting upset because things ain't going your way. People ain't responding how you want them to. People ain't treating you how you want them to treat you. And it could just spiral. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. Some of these struggles I just named are sometimes, something that hits me. But just think about how patient God is with you. Is all I want to say, because he sure is, and sometimes we take that for granted.
Exactly. So as we analyze the story of Ruth and just see how faithful, she was to Naomi, and even how faithful she was to God and seeking that out and still staying, here's another thing. I'm sure she had her days, I'm sure, but she stayed faithful to God and stuff like that too, because you got to remember, she did say, your God will be my God, and she did that. Though we're not talking about Boaz did that too. He was very, very graceful in things in that sort. So, and we saw sovereignty through that because we know Jesus came out of that lineage and God used that. So we love y'all guys, and we hope that this has helped y'all this week, and hope to know that just think about that friend that might need you today and text them and say that I'm thinking about you. And be there for them. So we love y'all guys. Remember, our email is madlcg05@gmail.com. We're on the Twitter. We're on live right now. We're on the Facebook. We're on live right now. You can hit us up there, message us. Remember, we are selling T-shirts. Those are on Facebook, and I need to add those to Twitter as well. One's 25 and one's 20. So let us know, and we hope that you have a good week. We love y'all. Peace out.